All right, football is where we head now on the SportsMax zone, and Matchweek 22 in the Ray and Nephew Jamaica Premier League concluded on Monday with a doubleheader at the National Stadium East Field in Kingston, and boy, were we treated to a goal fest. Well, first up, reigning champions Cavalier. Of course, they got back-to-back winning ways with a 2-1 victory over Vare United, dampening the debut of reggae boy Tyreek McGee, who made his first start for the Clarendon-based club. And then, in the main event, an absolute firecracker of a garden derby, a match between fierce rivals Tivoli and Arnett Gardens, which immediately placed itself into classic territory and delivered arguably the match of the season so far. Don't take my word for it, we have the highlights.
Well, the West Kingston derby had an expansive highlight package, all of 8 goals. Let's get going. As Tivoli Gardens in the first half had the better of the opportunities. They really pressed Arnett Gardens to their undoing. Arnett Gardens undoing, that is. Tivoli Gardens with the first goal. Nikolai Fuller shaking one man and firing a rocket from the left foot. Going beyond David Wall in goal for Arnett Gardens, the young juvenescent player. Tivoli, they were pegged back though. Joel Jones easily climbing over the head of Barrington Price and just nodding that one beyond Diego Horton. That was 1-1. Fantastic goal. More action. Tivoli Gardens having that shot through Nikolai Fuller. Wall with a save. This one, a header from Barrington Price off the upright, fell to Rashawn outfield, and he fired home from point-blank range. A returning resident, Tivoli Gardens man, formerly of Vare. And what a reintroduction to the Tivoli Gardens faithful. Second half. Make that first half, that was a telling strike. More action now. Steve Clark, ball across. And Garnett with the finish. That was 3-1 for Tivoli. And you have to think that that would have been enough to see out the game. It was a deflected effort as Joel Jones unsettled Zaynavin Wall. But Jaheim Thomas sprung to life. He had that shot. Arboyne should have found the back of the net. He didn't. And at that moment you thought, well, it's just not going to happen for them. But then this happened. The corner kick, Joel Jones headed it on. Warner Brown was on hand to find the finish. Joel Jones rather with the strike from his right boot. And then Warner Brown with the headed clearance. Missed header from Cockings. Seeing Warner Brown go through. Cavan Wilson couldn't find the clearance. Warner Brown continued to push forward. Got the gentlest of touches, and the goal going his way. That was his second of the night. 3-3 at that moment. More action. He turned one defender, and then Malik Cockins brought him down. Was outside the area, but the fall was inside the area, and Cockins sent off. Warner Brown sent Arnett Gardens in the lead. Here's the third. The hat-trick completed. 4-3 for Arnett Gardens. Comeback completed. More action. Kimani Arboyne driving forward. It fell for Warner Brown. He could have had a 4-timer, but he laid it on the platter for Fabian Reed. And he got his second this season. Expansive highlights package. Lots of goals. Lots of action. The West Kingston derby, not disappointing, and at the end it's Arnett Gardens who will say one garden.
All right, naturally there was a contrast in emotions from the head coaches. Let's take a listen.
It worked for us tonight. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I thought we were very lethargic at the start, and we didn't have enough energy, and they out-hustled us. Hence we were behind. You know, we got full level and then they went up in front again. But it's good. We had to make some adjustments, which we did, and it worked for us. You know, we got a lot more energy. And once our players get going, it's difficult sometimes to manage us when we go running at teams, you know.
Today is the worst I've seen a defense unit play at this level. And you cannot, I mean, there's so much things we can talk about. But these players have to understand, if you're playing top flight, it can be a joke thing where you just allow players to just do as they like. Goalkeeper, there's so much to talk about.
Oh, wow. Well, Matt's so high in energy, so we've brought some extra energy into our studio as well. Yeah, I'm talking about our in-house football analyst, Leger Williams. So, Leg, a lot to talk about. Maybe can we just start with what Coach said, seeing that it just happened? Because, I mean, fiery comment there coming from him.
Yeah, and rightfully so. It was a capitulation of the highest order. I think that, you know, Tivoli, what they do very well is start games, and because they have a lot of high energy and they press well, and they know how to pin teams in and on the transition, well, the offensive transition at least, because I'll get into their woeful defending and defensive transition, but yeah, they really know how to attack. I would say for the first 70 minutes of a game, which in this case, it was actually exactly the first 70 minutes of the game.
Yes.
They can outplay basically anyone, but after that, they really started to struggle, and the defense, it was really bad. I don't want to lump on anything more because I'm sure Coach Jerome would have said anything and everything in that dressing room.
Yeah, Tivoli leading 3-1 up until that 70th minute, and then, of course, Arnett coming from behind to defeat them. Good to see Fabian Reed scoring that goal. You can tell the energy that he brings to that Arnett Garden setup. And then, of course, the hat-trick that we got from Warner Brown. Let's talk a bit about their goal scorers.
Yeah, Arnett, I think, as I was saying, for the first 70 minutes, Tivoli were the better team. But Coach Xavier Gilbert made some changes, changed up the system, and I think it would be... Obviously, I love to talk about tactics, but for a game like this, I don't really think it makes much sense to, because there's just so much happening, the momentum swings that happen in the game. And when it comes down to the changes, I think Xavier Gilbert just got all of his best attackers on the pitch at the same time. Brought on Kimani Arboin, brought on Fabian Reed, new transfer in Shantamoy Taylor from Dumbo Holding as well. Rashane Thompson made a huge impact, and he left Marlon Martin to just be that sole pivot. And they just went and attacked, and from that second goal went in, Warner Brown's first goal, you could feel the momentum change and shift, and they just went on a huge run following that. And I think it was a fantastic attacking performance for that last 20 minutes, and if they had played like that for most of the game, they wouldn't have been in that situation, but hey. But yeah, Warner Brown, I'd love to talk about Warner Brown. The coach, Steve McLaren, the Reggae Boys head coach, was in the venue, and he really put a strong case for himself, I think, into getting some serious minutes, not only in these upcoming games against Trinidad, but in the future. Of course, it's well documented that Mikel Antonio will be out of action for quite some time, so the Reggae Boys are searching for options across the forward line, and I've come on the show previously and spoken about Shanil Thomas and what he can bring. But Warner Brown, I think, for this season, when it comes on to being an out-and-out number 9, he has been nothing short of spectacular, and it's not only in the goals that he's scoring, because he is now the leading goal scorer in the league with 13 strikes, but it's also his all-round game, which I think has been fantastic. And if we were to bring up the Tivoli red card, not necessarily the penalty, obviously, he scored the penalty, but the play that he made for the red card, I think if there was a scout from Europe in the building at that time, he would have been signed on spot just off of that action alone. Because what scouts would look for is intensity, 1, your ability to repeat actions, 2, and the speed at which he turned his defender was genuinely frightening. Obviously on TV, he looks like he's going fast, but being there live, because I had to go and watch a game live, of course, and I love watching live football, but being there live and seeing the speed that he completed that action with, it was very frightening, and the fact that he was able to maintain his body control as well. I think Warner Brown, a confident Warner Brown, is a very frightening prospect, and he's starting to scare all of the league, really. Yeah,
and, you know, Warner Brown is in the Reggae Boys setup for their 2 friendly matches against Trinidad and Tobago. A player who isn't in, and I know on Monday, that was yesterday, you spoke about Nikhil Ellis of Racing United and the disappointment that that youngster is not in the side. But Fuller from Tivoli Gardens, another one who is not there, and I know you have been quite impressed with. and I suspect you thought he was impressive last night as well.
Yeah. Well, you see, the thing is, I'll say it, I'm looking straight into the camera for this one. I think personally, I don't know who made the final call in picking the Reggae Boys squad. There's only one, I would say, natural left winger in that squad, that being Kimani Arboin, who is a very good left winger. Another left winger that was left out of the squad as well, Devontae Campbell down at Mount Pleasant, and I'm hearing that's due to fitness issues. But when it comes on to watching the league week on week, when it comes on to what players can do from that left wing position, I spoke about the speed at which a player can play if a scout was watching the game. I speak about your body control. I speak about being one of the best set piece takers in the league at all ranges as well. Very two-footed, extremely skillful and creative in getting out of situations. With all due respect to all of the very good left wingers in the league, Nikolai Fuller is the best left winger in the league, if I'm being very honest. Only 20 years of age, and I think it's the biggest misfortune that he is a player that's not in the Jamaica squad to take on Trinidad, because he most certainly deserves it, just based on the responsibility that he takes up for Tivoli Gardens. He basically is their attack, especially when players are coming in and out. He's the youngest player in the attack. As I said, his set pieces, whether he's taking corners with both feet, whether he's taking free kicks from anywhere on the pitch inside of the attacking half, he's just the complete package. And obviously, he has things that he needs to improve. But I think this is the time to get some proper coaching in and improve that. And when I was speaking to his head coach, Jerome Waite, he said he understands that maybe there are flaws in his game that they wouldn't pick him for, but pick him and give him a chance to fail. Don't just pick him because you see those flaws. So I think it's a huge misfortune that Nikolai Fuller isn't in the Reggae Boys squad.
Yeah, of course, he's just 20 years old, so a very young player as well. And as Lejay said, with a lot of upside for him, so a lot of improvements he can make. Let's talk about Tivoli as a unit, though, because earlier you spoke about their inability to play at a really high intensity for 90 minutes, and that they play extremely well for 70 minutes but are unable to sustain that. That is surprising for me, because Jerome Waite generally builds his teams on fitness.
Yeah.
I am not sure I've ever seen a good unfit Jerome Waite team.
I wouldn't say they're unfit. I just think it doesn't transmit throughout the squad. So, for example, last night they would be missing Nathan Thomas. I think if he was in the middle of the park, I'm not saying it would have stopped Arnett Gardens coming back into the game, but that would be more energy in the midfield to stop Arnett Gardens. Because if Arnett Gardens are a team that is built to do two things very well. Yes, they keep the ball well, but two things that they do extremely well is be extremely effective on set pieces, and they're killers on the transition, the offensive transition, the counter-attacks. And all of their 5 goals came from those situations, or in the case of what would be Warner Brown's hat-trick, the 4th goal, a mixture of both, because it was a transition that he ended up being fouled in and then a set piece that they scored. So Tivoli, it's always going to be a tough game, and I think someone like Nathan Thomas in the middle of the park would have helped. But you have to bear in mind as well that Tivoli are a smaller squad than a lot of teams like Arnett Gardens, who could bring on all of those talented players off of the bench to freshen things up, as their head coach would have mentioned, and the fact that they also man-mark from the offset. So in many games that you see this season, especially when they're playing the top teams, that they can allow teams that like to play from the back and love to push up, when Tivoli can press them in a man-marking fashion. They usually do start the games against Cavalier, Mount Pleasant, and we start against Arnett. They usually start those games very well. But it's a very difficult thing to do that for an entire 90 minutes. Maybe they don't pace themselves well enough, but that causes them to struggle in the latter part of these games.
Yeah, let me ask you something quickly, Liz, about one of the comments that Xavier Gilbert made as the Arnett Gardens coach. He said, or suggested, I'm using my own words here, that there aren't many teams who can cope with Arnett Gardens when they are on their game and come running at you. They've scored 12 goals in their last 3 matches, Arnett Gardens. We know that this format allows for a team to be just okay in the regular season, but be good in the playoffs, and they can win the championship. Would you think that Arnett Gardens are a strong bet for the title this year? I know Mount Pleasant have been sailing out front, but we know the regular season is what it is. It isn't the season decider.
Yeah, I would say that it's not a bad bet, and I'm glad that he used those words that he used when he says runner teams, because that's specifically why I mentioned how strong they are on the offensive transition. Because yes, Arnett Gardens are a team well versed in keeping the ball well, but if you were to go and break down all of the goals they've scored this season, I could bet some serious money, without even remembering all of them right now, that over 50% of them came from either a quick counter-attack, an offensive transition, or a false transition that they have created from playing around the back. So when you see a move like that, 3 passes, and they have powerful ball carriers all over. Fabian Reed, I think, is the only exemption when it comes on to anyone who would be in their front 5 of their attackers at any given time on the pitch that isn't a powerful ball carrier. So I do think that when they do get into their stride and quite literally run at teams, they're extremely hard to stop, because very few teams can cope with that transition power.
Yeah, well, you know, the one thing for sure is the JPL always serves up good action, lots of excitement, and I know it will continue to do so. So we'll chat again soon, right?
Yeah, of course. I'm always here.
All right,
Right.
Of course. Let's take a full look at the results before we head to a break. What do we have here? All right, so Chapelton Maroons losing to Racing United. Don Beholden picking up a 2-0 win versus Montego Bay United. Harbourview 2-1 versus Mount Pleasant. Portmore a win against Humber Lion. What about that 1-0 draw between Waterhouse and Malines United? Cavalier 2-1 win versus Vere. And Arnett, as we said, 5 goals to defeat Tivoli Gardens. Now this is how the table looks. Mount Pleasant at the top, 52 points. Arnett Gardens in second on 45. 1 point separates them from third place Montego Bay United. Portmore United on 38. 1 point separates them from fifth place Cavalier. And of course Waterhouse round out the top 6. And of course Vere United and Humber Lion battling in that relegation zone. It's break time, my producer says. Let's go to a break.